One of the big changes will be how the web works and how people find information. And for the last 20 years, we've had this model where you come into Google, Google sends you to websites, you find information on those websites make money, right? So you type in a query, you end up at the Atlantic, you come through social media. That's going away, right? You'll go to Google, Google will just answer your query, right? You'll stay inside of these platforms and they'll use AI to keep you there. And so the nature of the web is going to completely change. And in fact, we might be moving into a web where browsers are completely different. And so I have a challenge of figuring out how we at the Atlantic will reach people in this new web, right?
That was Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic and author of the new book, The Running Ground. This is Marnie Salop. Welcome to the Marnie on the Move podcast.
And then, speaking of CEO, you also, are at the forefront of media and AI. And you've become one of the most visible, thoughtful voices on AI and journalism. Like, how do you feel like AI is going to shape the future of storytelling, and what opportunities or dangers you see ahead? And I know that you just did a big partnership. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, so there are huge opportunities and there are dangers, and they affect almost every element of storytelling. And so I think about it in lots of different ways. So one of the big changes will be how the web works and how people find information. And for the last 20 years, we've had this model where you come into Google, Google sends you to websites, you find information on those websites make money, right? So you type in a query, you end up at the Atlantic, you come through social media. That's going away, right? You'll go to Google, Google will just answer your query, right? You'll stay inside of these platforms and they'll use AI to keep you there. And so the nature of the web is going to completely change. And in fact, we might be moving into a web where browsers are completely different. And so I have a challenge of figuring out how we at the Atlantic will reach people in this new web, right? And people will also be sending out their own AI agents. Hey, go find me information, right? Go read every publication in the world and tell me what I need to know. So I need to build a business model that works on this new web and with these agents. So that's problem number one. We have solutions, but that's problem number one. Problem number two is that we at the Atlantic have always had this incredible moat, right? We have many of the best writers in the world. They write these awesome stories. People come to the Atlantic to read these stories. There will be lots of other publications that, with the power of AI, are able to write competitive stories, right? And they may be able to write stories that clone our stories. Hey, write a story in the style of the Atlantic, right? And so suddenly there's a very competitive landscape. And, will our best writers using AI be better than the best writers elsewhere using AI? I hope so. Will our best writers, if they don't use AI, be better than other writers using AI? Maybe not. And so figuring out how we can continue to be as excellent in a world of AI is really important. And then just getting the tools. Like, the tools are magical, right? They can help with creativity, they help with editing, they help with copywriting, they help with fact checking, they help with game changer, right? I think of, like, sometimes finding a story is finding a needle in a haystack, and AI is a magnet, right? It will help you go through data sets. It will help you go through databases. It will help you, I'm sure, prepare for this interview, right? It helps me prepare for interviews.
You saw the emojis in my questions.
I will, when I'm preparing for an interview, I host this podcast, The Most Interesting Thing in AI, and I interview people about AI, and I will sometimes, in preparation, go back and forth with an AI agent and say, okay, imagine that you are Andrew Yang, answer this question. Okay, now we'll sort of do a mock conversation so it prepares me better. So we have these incredible tools. And so what's happening to the journalism business is you have these amazing tools, and then you have these existential threats. And what we have to do is build a business model that is resilient against these existential threats while taking maximum advantage of the tools. And there are a lot of errors you can make, including fighting AI and saying, well, AI is an existential threat to journalism, and so we won't use it, right? Rah, 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 which is insane, right? But you're seeing that you're seeing that at lots of publications, and it's going to be terrible for them, right? Yeah. You can also see another category error, which would be, oh my God, this is the most incredible thing we've ever had. Let's throw out what we're good at and just adopt this, or let's take risks and let's break the relationship that we have with our readers. And so my view is that you have to be deeply steeped in the world. You have to have as much of an understanding as you can. And then you also have to have some humility and recognize that there's nobody who can see 2 years in the future. Like maybe you can see 6 months. No one can see 2 years of this stuff. It's changing so
Right.
fast. And so what I'm trying to do for the Atlantic is to build a resilient business model, get us all to use the tools in the smartest way, maintain our brand, maintain our relationship with our readers, and also hedge our bets by working and building partnerships with the AI companies, which,
Right. Which you just
they may
can't.
have all the money in the world in a year, right? There may be a very small number of economic winners that are worth $10 trillion, right? And we need to figure out how to position ourselves so that if that is what happens, there's a strong future for us.
I mean, I feel like this is like kind of similar to when print started to shift, right? And every single print media outlet, magazine, newspaper had to pivot into digital. And there was a lot of controversy around jobs, around content, around what that would look like. And I feel like we're like 15 years later and it's like the kind of de facto way to receive media. I mean, I still personally like print, but and like how our social media platforms have turned into news channels from like the evolution of television. And, so I don't know. I mean, I'm with the AI, and I love that you did that licensing deal with OpenAI with the Atlantic. And I love how you're evolving, but it sounds like you really do have to be deeply immersed in it to stay ahead of the curve.
I think that's right. And I think there are a couple of interesting distinctions between what happened with the print to digital shift. So one is that was huge, but it was kind of affected like the way we were distributed and read, and it didn't entirely affect directly the way content was created. Like ultimately the way you're distributed affects the way you create content, but it wasn't like, there were certain mutuals, it wasn't as powerful as what's happening now. And the lesson I think about more is that when that happened, nobody really foresaw the biggest effect on media, which was that advertising would get obliterated by Facebook and Google building different advertising models. And really interestingly, Craigslist crushing all classifieds, right? Like one of the reasons why local newspapers are so doomed is because in the shift from print to digital, Craigslist got invented and classified ads, which were this cash cow for local newspapers, went away, right? And so the lesson is when there's these tectonic changes, the biggest effect might not be what you predicted.
So how are you preparing your readers, I guess, with AI evolving so quickly? Like, how are you at the Atlantic? Obviously, we just talked about how you're adapting and leading, but like, how do you plan to maintain trust with your readers?
Well, so one of the key things is that we believe that the readers want to have connections to humans, right? And so we have a rule that nothing in the Atlantic, not one sentence, not one word, is written by AI. I had the same rule with my book. I've used AI in 1,000 ways, but I never used it to write. And I want there to be a very clear relationship. There are places where we use AI. So we will use AI to read stories out loud. We'll say, this is an AI generated voice, listen to our story. You just save so much time. You can't, if you want to have a story, an audio version go up quickly, it's a lot easier to use 11 Labs than to hire somebody to go into a studio. With some stories, we still do hire people to go into studios. So we try to maintain that, very clear rule. And there is a hypothesis that what's going to happen with AI, and it's a hypothesis I believe, that there will be kind of a flight to quality. There will be so much stuff out there. There'll be so much change, and there'll be so much chaos that if you have a brand that people really trust and believe in, you will have an edge. And like things are going to get really hard, right? There are tons of great companies that are going to be driven out of business, and there are tons of great companies that will be created from scratch. But of the legacy companies, the ones that are able to maintain their brand, maintain their trust, maintain their reputation, maintain their direct relationships with readers, those ones will do the best. And so that's one of the things I have to hold on to most tightly at the Atlantic.
What are some of the AI tools that you like, just for everyday people, that you're recommending people try or use or kind of explore?
Yeah, so one of the things that I had maybe half the people on my team is I force them all to do deep research queries in GPT-4. Now, GPT-5 has just been released as we're recording this, but a deep research query is the kind of query where a chatbot will go out for 20 minutes, 30 minutes and bring you back a research report. It's not just like, hey, answer this question for me, right? I think that's really important. The different models are also releasing study tools, right? Where you can talk to it like a student, right? Where if you want to learn something, instead of just saying like, the example I was looking at yesterday was double trigger options, right? For a board meeting where we were trying to figure out like stock compensation for new employees. And I was trying to figure out the rules. I can look it up or I can really learn it. And sometimes you want to really learn as opposed to looking it up. I think that people need to know how to upload documents and understand privacy concerns and restrictions, upload documents and kind of ground the AI models. So for my book, I would upload interview transcripts with the people I talked to. And then I would upload what I'd written. And I would say, hey, read my interview transcripts, read what I've written. Tell me, is there anything that's incongruous? Is there anything that I portray about these people's lives that doesn't completely square with what they told me, right? Is there anything that they said that is more dramatic than what I've included, right? And so it's sort of, grounding in documents that I think is incredibly useful. I guess the other thing to remember is just, they're really good and they're sometimes wrong. And you have to use them on stuff you understand really well. Like ask them about things you know about. Like my wife was doing this. She's like, my God, these bots are so stupid. I'm like, well, what were you asking about? She's like, the history of modern dance. Well, she's a dance historian, right? Like you're going to so remember that. And then when you ask it about like, I don't know, how to bake blueberry pancakes, remember that like it will have similar errors. And then an expert in blueberry pancakes would be frustrated. But for most of us, it's pretty good at telling you how to do blueberry pancakes or the history of dance.
Yeah. I always fact check it because you never know. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong though. Like and also like, if you're using a GPT, like Chat GPT, like there's new versions, there's paid versions, there's like, you could also, obviously there's other platforms. Are you not allowed to mention the names of those platforms? Is that like,
I'm trying to be neutral, right? I use every model, right?
You use everything.
I use Cloud, I use Gemini, I use Llama. I even use DeepSeek though. I've been very careful about privacy. I go on Hugging Face all the time, right? I use Perplexity. I use tons of models, so I want to understand them. Each model is good at different things. I actually think, I have lots of concerns about the direction that X is going in, but I think that the way Grok is embedded in X is amazing. And so the AI engine, right? So we were like, explain this tweet, and the AI will explain the tweet, which is wonderful. I use lots of different AI models, right? And I'll use Claude, I use ChatGPT, I'll use Gemini, I use Perplexity, I use Llama, I sometimes use DeepSeek, right? I will go in if somebody has a new model or they put a different build on it, I'll try it. I love ProRata. I think that's amazing, right? Their Gist AI engine actually compensates creators. Like that is good for the world. That's cool. I like to read news through Particle, right? Like I'm trying to I use Nomi to understand these. There's so many different tools that I like, and I try to use as many as I can to understand them all better.
You had mentioned that like AI is going to give people an advantage, right? And so everybody kind of needs to get on the same page. Do you feel like that's kind of how Super Shoes were when you were at Wired and you were like, you guys did that first article on Nike's carbon plated super shoe and now like Ironman banning, not carbon plated, but like just the stack height. I mean, yeah.
It actually is a little bit like that. It is a clear advantage, right? And there's a very brief moment where, I guess the difference is that it would be like if Super Shoes got 3% better every 3 months, right?
Right. Agreed.
And if every time you ran in a Super Shoe, it made your next Super Shoe better. So, but it is a little bit like that. Like it's this unambiguous, and people who don't use it, just like people who didn't use Super Shoes, are just making a mistake,